Hey, folks, it's Chris. I am going to review Madam Web. Kind of painful, to be honest. The short version, it is in fact not a good movie for several reasons, some of which are a little amusing. So that's what I'll try to focus on.
Don't you ever enter my life again. Do you hear me?
But my short version is I don't think this is worth your time. It is about an hour and 50 minutes to the point where the credits start. By the way, there's no post-credit scene, so if you ever watch this on streaming or something, you can mercifully cut it short there. That is probably the biggest mercy that the film has, that they don't have a post-credit scene. So when the movie is done, you can leave. You are free to go. But it's pretty cruel to you in the meantime, in that it is fairly dull throughout the majority of the middle, and it's kind of awkward. I would call it awkward with both the characterization, the film, and really the editing choices. That's what I will say is probably one of its biggest flaws is some really bad edits. And it's laughably bad. Folks, how bad? We get to the end, right? And in the finale, this isn't really a spoiler per se. I'm just explaining what this movie is. Madam Web defeats the villain of the piece with Pepsi. Quite literally, she uses Pepsi to defeat the villain. So it is some of the most egregious product placement I've seen in a film in quite a while. Early in the movie, Cassie Webb, main character, Cassie Webb, that's her name. Cassandra Webb, she goes by Cassie. Okay, Cassie Webb goes to a cookout with some friends. Somebody hands her a Pepsi, and she really does one of those sort of commercial things where she's like, holding it up here and sort of like cheating it towards the camera and going like, And she goes, I can't have a beer instead? And they're like, no, I think you need that, okay. And then at the very end, she uses Pepsi. I'll explain a little bit more. What is the movie about? It is essentially one of these massively stretched out deconstruction origin stories because by the very end of the movie, Cassandra Webb mirrors her comic book counterpart, but up until then, it really doesn't look or feel like the comic book character, which, by the way, a relatively obscure character. I think we can all agree. I would say Madam Web fulfilled an important role in the Spider-Man comics for a time, which is sometimes, and I think this is a good choice in the comics, Spider-Man, Peter Parker, has had various mentor figures. I think that sort of helps give the title a unique direction and keeps him feeling a little younger because he's learning something from somebody. And when I say mentor, I would call like Captain Stacy a mentor. That's Gwen Stacy's father. I would say Madam Web was a mentor for a while. Ezekiel Sims is a mentor. Well, Ezekiel Sims by name is in this movie, but he really is in name only. The Ezekiel Sims in this film does not match his comic book counterpart at all. And finally, there are 3 Spider Women. Now, the trailer would have you believe that they are all, superhero versions. We've got Aranya, I think, is what Anya Corazon went by. I could be a little wrong. I know there was also an Arachne, but I think it was Aranya, if I'm remembering right. And a Spider-Girl and a Spider-Woman, the Julia Carpenter black and white costume that mirrors what Spidey wore when he got the symbiote. But the superhero stuff, it's all in visions. The characters are barely in their costumes. You only see quick little snippets of them in superhero costumes. That would be fun for a superhero movie. You really do not get superhero action. You don't. It's just sort of people dealing with a threat. What kind of a movie is this supposed to be? Like, what is the story here? That's hard to say. uh, Cassie Webb has a type of origin through this, and she changes physically, and I guess her sort of emotional background changes a little by the time it wraps up. But um, I guess you'd call it self discovery, right? I guess if I'm being generous, I'd say that's the sort of framework of this story. Uh, I know I'm rambling here. I don't have like a script. The movie follows Cassie Webb, who is a paramedic. And by the way, uh, you know what? At this point, the hell with it. There's nothing more I can say that's non spoiler. I'm going to just get into spoilers. So you can stop here if you don't want to be spoiled by this movie. That said, it's not a good movie. I don't recommend using your time, even if you could see it for free, which I basically did with AMC stubs. You know, I didn't have to pay for an extra ticket or anything like that. But at this, yeah, I wouldn't have seen this if I didn't do a show about comics. Uh, in fact, I did not like Morbius, but you know what? I think Morbius was a slightly better movie than this because the character was better defined, and a little more likable. In fact, which and I don't really care for Jared Leto a lot of the time, but Morbius was probably a more relatable, likable character than Cassie Webb. Dakota Johnson as an actress can work well, but within a certain range, in my opinion. I liked her in the horror movie Suspiria. That was a remake, but I actually thought she was quite good in that, where she sort of has to play a fairly reserved character. She's not super emotive. You know, she's kind of flat, and I don't think it works well for a larger than life superhero movie. I did not think she really gave us anything to like. Cassandra Webb is a little sarcastic. I guess that's what you'd call her personality. She's sarcastic, but it just sort of comes off a little bit like a little mean. Like she's just not that nice to the people around her, and she's very frustrated with things, which is understandable because I guess she grew up an orphan, but she's just not likable. Uh, she works as an EMT. Her partner, Ben Parker, as in yes, Peter Parker's Uncle Ben. Uh, we also meet his. How is this all related now that I'm thinking of it? I guess we meet his. I am so confused right now. Mary Parker was Peter Parker's mother, but I'm trying to remember, was Mary and Ben, were I guess they were brother and sister? Is that how it works? I didn't take time to think of Peter's family tree. Because Mary Parker is also in this, played by Emma Roberts, but it's a pretty small role. She's like 8 months pregnant. The name Peter is never uttered. The name May is never uttered, although Ben says that he's starting to see somebody important. So if you're curious, like, oh, this is all before Peter Parker, Spider-Man, yes, to be clear, this is specifically set, a little confusingly, in 2003, which I think Sony thinks if this did well, they could roll these characters into the MCU since we've got, Spider-Man there. But they do not specifically mention Peter Parker. They do not mention May Parker, but they do have Ben Parker and Mary Parker. And Mary's husband, Richard, is off on business, it's said. Sort of weird. The movie starts with, Cassie mostly doing EMT stuff after a short intro where back in 1973, her mother was working in the Peruvian rainforest studying spiders that specifically, we are told multiple times through the movie, have unique peptides that means that their venom could potentially cure disease. She's hired a bodyguard, Ezekiel Sims, who, once she catches the spider, he kills all the other scientists in the camp and struggles with Cassie's mom and shoots her. And then some Peruvian people that sort of look like weird Spider-Man knockoffs because they're all in like red with like black webbing all over them. They try to rescue Cassie's mom's life, they do rescue Cassie's life by letting one of these mystical spiders bite the mom. It saves Cassie's life as a baby, but she grows up in the foster system. That and then the initial EMT stuff is all edited really frenetically. Imagine somebody like Sam Raimi that has really unique visuals, and sometimes he'll have moments in his like Spider-Man movies. You've probably seen those, maybe some of his Evil Dead movies, where they'll have like an important scene for the character in terms of like maybe suiting up or uh, getting ready, something like that, and or something attacking, and he uses lots of like quick cutting and unique angles and everything. That's interesting, but they do something where they're just like cutting as Cassie is driving the ambulance to an emergency scene, and it's so annoying and awkward because there's so many cuts. It's like if you've ever seen the movie Taken, there's a scene where old man Liam Neeson runs and jumps over a fence, and if you break it down, there's something like 20 edit cuts to have him just simply get over a fence. It's all cut, really, really awkward. They do that at the beginning. It felt very disorienting for establishing these characters initially. I feel like I'm already bogging down in some details, but um, Ezekiel Sims in this, so he stole the spider, right? And he has visions that he will be killed by 3 spider women. That's where we get some of the flashes of these teenage girls, Maddie Franklin, Anya Corazon. In this one, they call Julia Carpenter Julia Cornwall. They changed her name for some reason that I don't understand. And I know that Sydney Sweeney is the actress playing Julia. I don't know the other 2 actresses' names. Sorry. So Ezekiel wants to find these girls and kill them before his visions of them killing him come true. That's his whole motivation in this movie. We don't really know exactly why he stole the spider, other than maybe he knew or that it could give him powers. He doesn't want to, for instance, take over the world. He doesn't want to transform people into spider people. He doesn't want to unlock some sort of hidden knowledge of the universe. All he wants to do is stay alive. And he feels that he needs to kill these 3 girls to keep his visions from coming true. That's very weak motivation, in my opinion. He just wants to stay alive. Everybody wants to stay alive. So he hires a computer like whiz kid girl that is using in 2003 state of the art facial scanning on hacking all these closed circuit cameras and like bank cameras and stoplight speed cameras, things like that. And he eventually tracks these girls down, but Cassie Webb has started getting visions of the future, and she's able to prevent these girls from getting killed by Ezekiel. Again, in the comics, Ezekiel is a mentor. He's a good guy. There is at the same time that Ezekiel was introduced Moreland, and Moreland fed off of spider people, but that's not what he does. He would not get extra power by killing these girls or anything like that. He just wants to stay alive, and he feels that he needs to kill his killers. So, sort of a weak villain, really weak villain, to be honest. He's just a guy. He's just a guy that, like, yes, he killed to get that spider, and that's bad, but it's never really outlined exactly what his ultimate goals in life are at all. So I didn't understand him very well at all. By the way, also bad editing is how they represent Cassie Webb's powers. For instance, she gets on a train when she first meets all 3 of these girls and saves them from Ezekiel attacking. And there are like 4 sort of quick scenes where she envisions something from the future, at least 4. And it just keeps resetting, And I was like, I get her powers. You have explained it to me. You could have done this like with one little flash forward, like in the Final Destination movies, if you've ever seen those. And instead, it's just lots of little bits, and it just kept going and going and going. Her powers were never really depicted consistently. And I understand that she doesn't know how to use her powers at the beginning. She eventually goes to the Peruvian rainforest she's gone for like a full week, and Ezekiel doesn't find these girls, but she's gone for like a full week, we're told. And one of the Aranya people tells her about her origin and stuff. That's fair. That's classic, um classic storytelling in terms of the character sort of returns to where they're from, and learns something about themselves and is able to move forward in life. That's fine. They invert the classic Spider-Man phrase, and he tells her, "Once you accept your powers, with great responsibility will come great power." Terrible. They even have, like, I think, an audio of that, like, replayed during the big finale. Um, she comes back, and because she's now sort of, she understands everything. She also got to, like, look even further back than her birth, and she saw that her mother had gotten a medical diagnosis that her baby Cassie would be born with genetic defects, and that's why she risked going to the Peruvian rainforest at 8 months pregnant to or 9 months pregnant, I guess. Yeah, yeah. Cassie was born on time. Um, yeah, she was trying to find the venom to heal her baby. So Cassie sort of is like, "Oh wow, my mom loved me. That's so nice to know." And so now she's confident, and she can sort of control her visions, which just basically means that Ezekiel has finally, like, tracked down the girls, and there's a chase scene in Manhattan at night, in cars and stuff, and she's able to just predict what Ezekiel will do and everything. It all basically leads to a fight at a warehouse firework warehouse, yeah, a firework warehouse on the docks, and there's a huge Pepsi Cola sign across the top, like the letters Pepsi Cola. And Madam Web essentially uses her powers to both predict where Ezekiel will be, and at one point she sort of is she allows herself to be in multiple places at the same time, which I was like, well, that's kind of a new wrinkle to her powers. She's able to sort of put versions of herself in three different places to help each of these girls that's being attacked. Again, these girls do not have their spider powers. That's just something that'll happen in the future in Madam Web 2, I guess. And because Cassie can see the future, she's able to manipulate Ezekiel into standing in a certain place where, as the fireworks are going off and the building is getting destroyed, the S in Pepsi and then the P both fall on top of Ezekiel and crush him. So she defeats Ezekiel with Pepsi. Uh, the letters were S and P, and I found myself, like, wondering, like, does that stand for Sony Pictures? Is that starting to spell Spider-Man? And I go, maybe I'm just giving it too much credit. Maybe, like, they just got paid by Pepsi, and fine, that's it. And in that whole battle, Cassie loses her sight and the ability to walk. So at the very end, she's in a wheelchair with, like, big glasses visor thing, and the girls are all her friends now, and they come to visit. But and she can see the future. So she's the version of Madam Web that we might recognize from the comic books. I'm skipping over all sorts of stuff in the middle because, like I say, an hour and 50 minutes until the credits start. It's a very long movie, and the stuff in the middle is just really paced slowly. It's really paced slowly, but again, it's because the Madam Web or Cassie Webb and the three girls do not really have powers. The three girls have no powers, and Cassie herself, can only see sort of snippets of the future. So that's not a very aggressive power set. It's all just sort of running. Every once in a while, Ezekiel shows up. She might have, like, a flash of one of them getting killed, but she's able to avoid that, and it just keeps running. It's slow, it's a lot of sort of hiding out in the woods, hiding out in a motel, having Cassie take a long trip to Peru to learn about her origins, and the girls, I guess, just hang out with Ben Parker at his house and don't go out for, like, over a whole week. It's dull, and the characters aren't really likable. At least Cassie, she just didn't, like, do anything for me. Just not a lot of superhero action either. This must have been a pretty low budget affair, all things considered. Uh, Not a lot of action scenes. A few. They're fine, but it starts off with awkward editing. You get a somewhat unlikable character. You get pretty bored in the middle, and then there's the finale, which is a little more exciting. But it's so obnoxious that she's using this huge Pepsi sign to save the day. So that's the movie. I don't really have a whole lot more to say other than I tried to watch it so that maybe you don't have to. And trust me, I'd be happy to give it a good review if it warranted. I also was not excited to see Venom. But you know what? Venom, it hurts a little by not being connected to Spider Man. It was still a very watchable movie. Sequel, probably not quite as good, still good. Tom Hardy's a good actor. Michelle Williams is a good actor. The people that they've got in Venom and the action scenes and the look and the editing and the storytelling, pretty damn solid. So I'm like, okay, like that was one that I hadn't been looking forward to, but I was like, yeah, it's a decent enough movie. I don't have like lots of criticisms for it. It's fine for what it is. Morbius, I didn't really like. I found that pretty boring and forgettable. But compared to Morbius, I find the main character less interesting and less likable, and the film is more slowly paced and has very awkward editing decisions to it that just pull you out of the movie. That's my 2 cents. I hope this was of some value to you. And now back to editing the next comic tropes. Thanks, everybody.